Ecclesiasticus. Written more than 2,000 years ago, it offers insights into human nature, the responsibilities we carry toward one another, and the eternal consequences of our choices. In a world where ethical dilemmas and personal struggles remain constant, the lessons found in Sirach feel surprisingly relevant, reminding us that ancient wisdom still speaks to modern lives. Whether navigating complex relationships, facing the challenges of leadership, or wrestling with questions of mortality, the guidance within this text provides both grounding and reflection. Imagine Jerusalem in the 2nd century BCE, a city alive with cultural intersections and intellectual ferment. The streets were filled with the scent of spices, the echoes of marketplaces, and the hum of philosophical debate. The Jewish people were deeply rooted in their traditions, yet exposed to the Hellenistic influences that spread across the region following the conquests of Alexander the Great. Within this vibrant but turbulent environment lived a scribe named Ben Sira. He observed the intricacies of society, the behavior of rulers, the conduct of families, and the moral challenges that shaped everyday life. With clarity and insight, he compiled his observations into a guidebook of wisdom that could instruct not only his contemporaries, but generations yet to come. His work reflects a deep understanding of the human condition, combining ethical reflection with practical advice, grounded in a profound reverence for God. Sirach's writings cover a remarkable range of topics. He addresses personal virtues, such as humility, patience, and honesty, while warning against vices like pride, laziness, and deceit. He offers guidance for leaders and rulers, emphasizing fairness, justice, and responsibility. Beyond human interactions, he explores the connection between ethical behavior and divine order, highlighting how reverence for God shapes a life of integrity and purpose. The book does not present wisdom as a distant, abstract concept. Rather, it is practical, applied, and deeply rooted in real-world experience. Through maxims, proverbs, and reflections, Sirach communicates lessons that are at once timeless and intimately human. The value of the Book of Sirach lies not only in its practical advice, but also in its universal relevance. Life in the modern age is filled with moral challenges that, though expressed differently, mirror those faced by people in ancient Jerusalem. Decisions about honesty in the workplace, responsibility toward family and community, and confronting personal ambition are issues that persist across millennia. By engaging with the teachings of Sirach, we are invited to pause, reflect, and consider how our actions align with ethical principles and spiritual awareness. It encourages a perspective that balances worldly responsibilities with higher moral standards, offering a blueprint for navigating the complexities of life with clarity and conscience. To understand Sirach is to appreciate the man behind the text. Ben Sira was not a distant philosopher. He was a meticulous observer of life and a participant in the world he described. His writing conveys empathy for the struggles of ordinary people, acknowledging the tensions between desire and discipline, power and humility, life and mortality. He recognized that ethical guidance is meaningful only when it resonates with lived experience, and he wrote with an awareness that wisdom must be applicable, actionable, and comprehensible. Through his work, readers encounter a voice that is both instructive and approachable, one that speaks across the ages with honesty and moral clarity. As we begin this journey through the Book of Sirach, it is important to remember that the text is not merely an ancient artifact, it is a living source of reflection and insight. Its teachings invite readers to examine the choices they make, the virtues they cultivate, and the ethical standards by which they live. By exploring its pages, we connect with a tradition of moral inquiry that extends far beyond the boundaries of its historical moment. Each lesson, each reflection, and each proverb carries the weight of centuries, offering guidance for personal growth, communal harmony, and spiritual understanding. Before we dive further into the stories and wisdom of Sirach, I want to encourage you, the viewer, to take part in this journey actively. Bible says, if you're enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. Help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support ensures that more people can discover the timeless lessons hidden within these texts. You can also send a super thanks to support us financially, helping us continue producing content that explores the rich history and wisdom of biblical literature. Take a moment to comment below your name and city, letting us know where and when you're watching this video. Your participation brings this community to life. And finally, if you wish to study further, the complete Bible, 88 books, and the Book of Enoch in English are available through the link in the description, offering you direct access to the original wisdom texts we are exploring together. With this foundation laid, we are ready to step into the world of Jesus Ben Sirach, to witness the moral landscapes he navigated and to uncover the lessons he sought to impart. From the bustling streets of ancient Jerusalem to the inner chambers of ethical reflection, the Book of Sirach presents a journey of thought, insight, and spiritual awareness. Its teachings are more than guidelines. They are invitations to consider how we live, how we act, and how we honor the sacred principles that govern our shared humanity. As we continue, let us keep in mind that each lesson, proverb, and reflection is designed to speak to the heart, offering guidance that is as relevant today as it was more than 2 millennia ago. Jesus Ben Sirach was a perceptive observer of life, who was aware of the hardships and goals of those around him. He was more than just a scribe or a compiler of wisdom. He was raised in a period of political and cultural unrest after being born in Jerusalem in the 2nd century BCE. Jewish traditions and the Hellenistic values that had taken over the Eastern Mediterranean coexisted incongruously in the city, which was a nexus of tradition and outside influence. Sirach had a deep regard for education and an innate interest in human behavior patterns from a young age. Despite his intense focus on studying the Torah, he was not afraid to observe the social, political, and personal struggles that regular people faced. He realized that wisdom had to deal with the practical realities of living morally in a world that was complicated and changing. It could not be separated from everyday life. The values of piety, education, and social responsibility that Sirach's family and community upheld influenced his upbringing. Since he was young, he has observed elders resolve conflicts within the community, mediate disagreements, and reach decisions that strike a balance between compassion and justice. His views on human ambition, virtue and vice, and the moral duties that all people have to God and one another were shaped by these experiences. He was a man who lived in Jerusalem, watched the marketplace, synagogues and courts, and paid close attention to the stories of people around him rather than a solitary philosopher who lived in a study. His observations were based on human experience, reality, and the social climate of his era. Even Jerusalem was a city of contrasts. The city was surrounded by families, merchants, and students going about their daily lives, but it was also impacted by outside forces. Traditional Jewish customs were in conflict with Greek language, philosophy, and cultural practices brought by Hellenistic influence. Sirach handled this setting with a sharp understanding of the fine line that separates upholding ancestors' customs from embracing new concepts. He recognized the need for wisdom to be adaptable enough to lead individuals through these cultural exchanges, while maintaining its foundation in the moral and spiritual lessons found in the Torah. His writings' depth and usefulness were influenced by the difficulties of upholding moral integrity, faith, and identity in such a situation. His book was written for both private and public reasons. Sirach aimed to offer direction for future generations as well as his peers. He understood that social unrest, individual ambition, and moral ambiguity could mislead people and communities. His writings were meant to serve as a guide for leading a moral life, a compilation of realizations derived from introspection, observation, and adherence to divine precepts. He provided a way to navigate life's complexities with integrity, caution, and a reverent fear of God by putting his wisdom into writing. He addressed a wide range of people, including leaders who could use advice on moral leadership, teachers, law students, and regular men and women. The goal of the book was to inspire, educate, and correct while fusing spiritual wisdom with useful guidance. Sirach used a profoundly humanized viewpoint when composing his reflections. He understood the conflicts that occur in families and communities, the temptations that people encounter, and the struggles of the heart. He presented people as having the capacity for both virtue and error, highlighting the importance of moral awareness, discipline, and guidance in leading a fulfilling life. He could be seen strolling through Jerusalem's winding alleys, observing parents guiding their kids, merchants haggling over prices, and leaders deliberating over tough choices. His comprehension of character, motivation, and consequence grew with each scene. He distilled lessons from these observations that were both practical and spiritually meaningful, accessible yet profound. The framework and subject matter of Sirach's writing were also influenced by the historical setting of his life. In the 2nd century BCE, Jerusalem's Jewish community placed a high importance on education, family, and community, but it was also impacted by outside influences and political shifts. Greek philosophical concepts, which provided different viewpoints on morality, the nature of the soul, and the structure of society, had started to spread. Instead of categorically rejecting these influences, Sirach combined his knowledge of Jewish tradition with an awareness of the wider intellectual landscape. His writings emphasize that discernment, humility, and ethical vigilance are necessary for true wisdom, striking a balance between respect for the law and receptivity to practical reasoning. The tone of Sirach's writing also reflects his personality. He is patient and empathetic, recognizing human frailties without discounting the possibility of development and progress. His observations inspire readers to pursue righteousness while acknowledging the limitations of human nature by expressing a sense of moral urgency combined with compassion. He understood that moral instruction needs to be delivered in a way that appeals to the emotions, speaks to the heart as well as the head, and offers resources for introspection and action. This makes his work more than just a collection of maxims. It is a guide for developing character, a companion for negotiating the moral terrain of life, and evidence of the timeless value of experience, observation, and introspection. It is crucial to imagine the life that inspired these works. Sirach probably passed through marketplaces and courtyards, spoke with families and scholars, and ran into situations that called for moral and practical discernment. Every interaction, every insight, and every contemplation added to the depth of his writing. Since wisdom must speak to the everyday realities of human existence, he wrote from lived experience rather than abstraction. His book's timeless value and ability to ring true for centuries can be attributed to this grounded approach. We can better understand Sirach's observations if we place him in the historical and social context of Jerusalem. A text that is useful, moral, and spiritually significant is the result of the interaction of tradition and outside influences, the difficulties of communal life, and the individual observation of human nature. By paying close attention to social dynamics and human nature, Sirach offers timeless advice that is incredibly relatable, with lessons that never cease to challenge, inspire, and educate. The Book of Sirach, also known as Ecclesiasticus, is a wealth of knowledge that is thoughtfully arranged to help its readers navigate life's obstacles, develop virtue, and seek a deep connection with God. In contrast to a story that centers on a series of events, Sirach offers its lessons in a collection of observations, maxims, and reflections that seamlessly transition between spiritual wisdom and useful guidance. It is purposefully organized, starting with an introduction that respects wisdom in general and presents it as a force that influences human experience and promotes comprehension. While later chapters examine human behavior, social responsibility, and ethical living, the first chapters present wisdom as a divine gift that is necessary for living a clear, humble, and reverent life. As one reads, it becomes evident that the book is a guide intended to promote moral judgment and introspection in daily life, rather than just a list of directives. Sirach is divided into a number of thematic sections that each focus on a distinct facet of morality and life. The development of personal virtue is the main topic of the early passages, which stress the value of humility, obedience to God, and closely examining one's own actions. Echoing ideas found elsewhere in the Jewish wisdom tradition, such as Proverbs 1:7, which states, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." These chapters emphasize that true wisdom starts with the fear of the Lord. In these sections, Sirach combines teaching with real-world examples to show how virtues appear in everyday contexts, such as social interactions, business dealings, and family relationships. Every lesson is intended to be put into practice, demonstrating how action and ethical consciousness are inextricably linked to wisdom. As the book goes on, it focuses on the obligations people have to one another and to society as a whole. Sirach highlights the moral duties that go beyond individual piety and provides advice on issues of justice, charity, and compassion. Addressing rulers and judges, the text offers guidance on honesty, fairness, and how to treat the weak and impoverished. By doing this, it highlights the fact that wisdom thrives in the context of community and social responsibility and is not self-contained. These passages remind readers that the pursuit of virtue is entwined with the welfare of others, and they are consistent with the larger Jewish tradition, which consistently connects moral behavior to spiritual devotion. The Book of Sirach also offers a profound analysis of human frailty and the temptations that confront people. It presents people as having the capacity for both virtue and error, while acknowledging the complexity of human emotions, goals, and desires. This dichotomy is examined by contrasting lessons on patience, honesty, and humility, with reflections on pride, envy, and laziness. Sirach offers a realistic and sympathetic perspective on human nature by addressing both the risks and the opportunities for development. Its observations are similar to those of Ecclesiastes, which addresses life's constraints and uncertainties, but Sirach takes a more proactive stance, providing specific advice for moral and spiritual growth as opposed to philosophical resignation. Sirach's prose skillfully blends poetry and useful advice throughout the book. The succinct yet profound maxims invite readers to stop and consider the ethical and spiritual ramifications of their decisions. For instance, the moral lesson and social observation conveyed by the advice to "do not praise a man before he speaks, for it is then that men are tested," call for patience and discernment in judgment. These sections highlight the book's meticulous attention to human experience and demonstrate how moral guidance is inextricably linked to lived reality. The teachings are emotionally resonant and memorable for generations to come because of the harmony between poetic language and useful insight. Sirach keeps coming back to the idea that all wisdom and moral behavior are based on a fear of God. From individual behavior to social responsibilities, this idea is interwoven throughout the text and acts as a unifying theme that unites disparate sections. By highlighting respect for God, Sirach situates moral conduct within a religious framework, demonstrating that moral judgment is a reflection of divine order rather than just a social construct. This viewpoint supports the continuity of ethical thinking within the tradition by being consistent with other Jewish wisdom writings. For example, Ecclesiastes considers the significance of living under divine guidance despite life's uncertainties, while Proverbs repeatedly states that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Building on these pillars, Sirach offers a thorough vision for a life based on virtue while also elaborating on real-world applications. Sirach's focus on real-world human experiences, friendship, family, wealth, and leadership is another noteworthy aspect of the book. The book provides advice on selecting friends, handling obligations to one's family and oneself, and negotiating relationships with integrity and care. These lessons acknowledge the difficulties that come with human interactions and offer solutions. For preserving moral and spiritual alignment, they are delivered with empathy and realism. Sirach makes sure that its lessons are applicable to the experiences of its readers, rather than being theoretical or abstract, by placing moral instruction within the framework of everyday life. It presents a world where moral judgments must be made constantly. Virtue necessitates attention to detail and introspection, and developing wisdom is a continuous, purposeful process. There are parallels as well as unique contributions when compared to other Jewish wisdom texts. Similar to Proverbs, Sirach places a strong emphasis on moral clarity and practical advice, but it goes farther to cover leadership, group responsibility, and general societal ethics. Sirach is more instructive, providing concrete methods for bringing human behavior into line with divine expectations, whereas Ecclesiastes frequently reflects on the transient nature of life and the certainty of death. Sirach has a distinct voice in the body of Jewish wisdom literature because of its blend of introspection, social ethics, and spiritual devotion. Its lessons encourage readers to incorporate virtue, respect, and sound judgment into every area of their lives. Sirach's timeless appeal stems from its capacity to unite the ancient and the modern. Its well-defined sections and thematically arranged reflections lead the reader through an investigation of morality, spiritual understanding, and human nature. A unified vision of moral living based on both divine and pragmatic principles is produced by the major themes of wisdom, virtue, and fear of God recurring throughout. The book offers advice that is both timeless and instantly applicable, speaking to the human condition in a way that goes beyond its historical setting. Its wisdom continues to serve as a benchmark for ethical contemplation, offering perspectives that readers from all walks of life find compelling and influencing our conceptions of morality, accountability, and the quest for a life well lived. Wisdom itself frequently manifests in the pages of Sirach almost as a character, a guiding force that molds the lives of men and women negotiating the intricacies of Jerusalem in the 2nd century BCE. Wisdom is accessible, useful, and closely related to human experience. It is neither aloof nor abstract. It appeals to people who are looking for direction, providing strength when making difficult decisions and clarity when things are unclear. Wisdom engages with common people, leaders, and academics in the book, emphasizing the challenges, uncertainties, and development that are part of being human. The lessons of Sirach are brought to life through these exchanges, turning impersonal ideas into real-world situations that readers can identify with and apply to their own lives. In Sirach, common people are portrayed as being torn between impulse and introspection, ambition and humility, and desire and discipline. They are merchants negotiating the demands of commerce, parents juggling the needs of their families with social responsibilities, and students attempting to comprehend the law and live up to divine standards. These common people struggle with universal issues like the desire to act selfishly, the disappointment of unfulfilled ambitions, and the unpredictability of interpersonal relationships. By observing their difficulties, Sirach exhibits compassion and wisdom, realizing that moral development is a process rather than a final goal, and that mistakes are a necessary component of growth. The book promotes patience by reminding readers that virtue is developed gradually via introspection, self-control, and diligent work. In Sirach, rulers and leaders also play a significant role in highlighting the moral obligations that come with holding positions of power. The book offers guidance on how to handle these difficulties with honesty and discernment. They encounter problems that put their judgment, fairness, and integrity to the test. The scribe highlights that authority is a trust with responsibilities to the community, especially the weak and impoverished, rather than an end in and of itself. Leaders are urged to listen intently, act justly, and make decisions that are both wise and compassionate. Readers are encouraged to think about the human side of governance, the uncertainties, anxieties, and temptations that come with power, and how moral standards can direct even the most difficult decisions through these reflections. The emphasis Sirach places on moral development via self-awareness is among its most remarkable features. People are urged to reflect on their own behavior, face their shortcomings, and develop virtues that demonstrate respect for God and empathy for others. Honesty is frequently emphasized as a reflection of character and divine alignment, rather than just as a social expectation. For instance, Sirach warns that integrity and dependability are the cornerstones of human relationships when he says, "A faithful friend is a sturdy shelter. He who finds one finds a treasure." Sirach 6:14. Another major theme is humility, which is presented as the antidote to ambition and pride. People can open themselves to wisdom and the possibility of growth by admitting their limitations and seeking guidance, a lesson that is relevant to all eras and cultures. Another lesson that keeps coming up is patience. Economic swings, political pressures, and personal adversities were among the everyday uncertainties that the people of Sirach's Jerusalem had to deal with. In this situation, the capacity to maintain composure, act thoughtfully, and postpone instant gratification turns into a criterion of character. The book provides helpful guidance on developing patience by using the experiences of people who resist temptation, resolve conflicts with others, or go through personal hardships to illustrate the concept. These symbolic characters struggle with anger, frustration, and doubt, but they learn to respond with poise and discernment through introspection and adherence to wisdom. In the text, wisdom is portrayed as both a teacher and a friend. It directs scholars in their quest for knowledge, common people in their day-to-day interactions, and rulers in matters of governance. The book personifies wisdom as being perceptive and receptive, observing human behavior and correcting when needed, while simultaneously promoting development, tenacity, and moral coherence. Sirach uses this personification to illustrate how pursuing virtue is a relational experience in which interaction, observation, and guidance are all crucial. The lessons are not theoretical, rather they are lived, put to the test in real-world situations and then confirmed by reflection and action. The battles portrayed in Sirach delve into the inner conflicts that characterize human existence and go beyond external circumstances. Characters struggle with ambition, jealousy, and the conflict between individual interests and group responsibilities. They have periods when they doubt their capacity to behave morally or to keep their word. Because of these remarkably human portrayals, readers are able to identify with the story and reflect on how they might handle comparable difficulties. Wisdom is inextricably linked to experience and moral engagement, as evidenced by the growth that results from introspection, moral behavior, and alignment with divine principles. Sirach also highlights how virtues are interrelated. Patience, humility, and honesty are all parts of a greater moral system rather than separate qualities. People are frequently inspired to strengthen other virtues by developing one, resulting in a unified approach to moral behavior. The text provides examples of how these qualities appear in real-world situations. A merchant negotiating fairly demonstrates honesty. A parent providing calm guidance to a child demonstrates patience, and a ruler making a difficult decision, while taking everyone into consideration, demonstrates humility. By relating abstract concepts to the realities of human existence, these examples give the lessons a concrete form. Characters are made more relatable, which gives the book a special accessibility. Readers are shown people who think, feel, struggle, and develop, people whose lives intersect with wisdom in ways that reflect their own experiences rather than abstract ideals. This method turns moral instruction into something relatable and dynamic, demonstrating that virtue is a lived practice that is cultivated via action, contemplation, and observation rather than a fixed quality. A constant conversation between divine principles and human experience is made possible by the personification of wisdom alongside human characters, which closes the gap between education and practice. All facets of daily life can benefit from the useful guidance found in Sirach. It discusses leadership, relationships, family duties, and personal behavior, consistently tying actions to moral outcomes. Readers are reminded through stories, maxims, and reflections that leading an ethical life necessitates ongoing consciousness, deliberate decision-making, and dedication to higher ideals. Characters' internal or external struggles serve as role models for overcoming obstacles, reassuring readers that failure and uncertainty are natural parts of development, and that persistent pursuit of virtue benefits individuals as well as society. Sirach notes that life is rarely a straight line. People are always torn between right and wrong, and their decisions are influenced by temptation, circumstance, and desire. Much of the human experience is characterized by the conflict between moral integrity and self-interest, between right and easy. Sirach does not hold back when describing these hardships in striking detail. For example, pride is portrayed as a subtle force that can impair judgment, skew relationships, and undermine trust, rather than just being arrogance. Pride-driven people may refuse advice, even when their mistakes are obvious, because they feel they are above correction. Such mindsets are dangerous, according to Sirach, who highlights the value of humility as a defense against the destructive forces of unbridled ego. Another recurrent issue in the text is greed, which shows up in both social interactions and individual ambition. Sirach illustrates how material desire can result in injustice and alienation by exposing those who hoard wealth or take advantage of others. In human terms, the effects of greed are portrayed as strained bonds, distrust, and internal conflict. These illustrations encourage readers to examine their own driving forces, identify the subtle ways in which selfishness can develop, and think about the wider effects of their decisions. By giving these conflicts a human face, Sirach brings impersonal moral precepts to life and shows that leading an ethical life involves constant attention to detail and deliberate choice. Another major issue is injustice, whether it occurs in interpersonal relationships or in societal structures. Sirach emphasizes the duties of those in positions of power, such as judges and local authorities, stressing that justice and compassion must be the guiding principles of all decisions. Leaders are portrayed as hurting not just others, but also themselves when they act selfishly, disregard the needs of the weak, or impose punishment without thinking things through. The text highlights how injustice destroys the community's moral foundation and shatters the peace that divine order intended. Through these depictions, Sirach demonstrates how virtue is inextricably linked to thoughtful interaction with others and offers a framework for comprehending ethical dilemmas in relatable, realistic terms. The lives of the people Sirach describes are filled with ethical conundrums, no matter how big or small. People have to manage tensions between expediency and principle, as well as between moral obligation and personal desire. Empathic portrayals of these tense moments acknowledge the emotional burden they bear, the inner monologue of people who must make tough decisions, the fear of choosing incorrectly, the allure of temptation, and the uncertainty of the results, is examined in the text. By addressing these conundrums, Sirach provides readers with a mirror for their own lives, promoting reflection and thoughtful deliberation before acting. In this situation, wisdom becomes a guiding force that helps people align their actions with divine expectations and illuminates the way through uncertainty. Social aspects of moral conflict are also covered by Sirach. The intricacy of human emotion and motivation is captured in the nuanced presentation of interpersonal conflicts, whether they are between friends, family, or neighbors. Alongside loyalty, forgiveness and generosity, betrayal, envy, and resentment are examined, exposing the decisions that define personalities and mold bonds between people. The text highlights that developing personal morality alone is insufficient. Virtue is relational. A recurring theme in the book is the necessity of being conscious of how one's actions affect other people in order to live an ethical life. Sirach paints an emotionally stirring picture of human life, one in which moral decisions have weight and significance by showing both the costs of vice and the benefits of virtue. Throughout these difficulties, divine guidance is ever present. In Sirach, God is portrayed as an active participant in human life who provides guidance, correction, and encouragement rather than as a detached observer. The fear of the Lord is frequently emphasized as the cornerstone of moral judgment, offering both spiritual stability and moral clarity. The passage reminds readers, for instance, that the Lord tests the righteous and will punish the proud. Sirach 2:1, implying that correction and guidance are intertwined and meant to foster growth rather than just impose obedience. Through these passages, Sirach gives readers comfort in knowing that they are not alone in moral struggles, and that protection and wisdom come from aligning oneself with divine principles. Vibrant examples of common struggles are used to illustrate the conflict between divine expectation and human frailty. People are tempted to compromise, take shortcuts, and be dishonest, all of which can compromise their integrity. The emotional stakes are high. The temptation to act against one's better judgment is accompanied by feelings of fear, guilt, and uncertainty. Sirach sensitively depicts these internal conflicts, recognizing the challenge of avoiding vice while reaffirming that it is possible to overcome it via introspection, prayer, and adherence to moral principles. These instances of inner turmoil endure for centuries, demonstrating the universality of moral struggle and the wisdom literature's ongoing significance. Pride, greed, and injustice are depicted through tangible human experiences rather than as abstract threats. A leader faced with a decision between fairness and favoritism, a merchant tempted to cheat, or a neighbor experiencing jealousy or resentment, all of these situations illustrate the repercussions of morally right or wrong behavior. Because Sirach's method is educational without being didactic, readers are able to understand the social and emotional aspects of moral decisions. The text shows that ethical living is a personal and collective endeavor, with decisions having an impact that extends beyond the individual by connecting virtue to observable results. The virtues of patience, humility, and integrity show up as guiding concepts during these difficulties. Sirach stresses time and again that virtue is developed gradually via introspection, self-control, and receptivity to both divine direction and other people's needs. The difficulties portrayed are not failures, but rather chances for development, showing that moral development is not impeded by human imperfection. Readers are encouraged to absorb the lessons by thinking about how they might handle similar circumstances in their own lives, and how following wisdom can turn moral conundrums into chances for development and comprehension. In the end, Sirach presents the human condition as a dynamic interaction between weakness and development, challenge and guidance, and temptation and virtue. According to the text, conflict is a necessary part of life and should be handled carefully and devotedly, rather than avoided. The book humanizes the problems and the solutions by examining pride, greed, injustice, and moral quandaries. It presents a picture of a world where moral consciousness molds decisions. Growth is an ongoing, introspective process, and divine guidance illuminates the way. The distinction between virtues and vices is not just theoretical in Sirach's world. It is ingrained in everyday existence and reflects decisions, actions, and character traits. One of the most important qualities is humility, which is frequently hailed as the remedy for arrogance and self-deception. According to Sirach, humility is a strength that allows people to recognize their limitations, ask for help, and engage with others in a thoughtful manner rather than as a weakness. Humility is the ability to listen without passing judgment, to act fairly even when there is a chance for personal gain, and to patiently acknowledge that one does not know everything. In today's world, humility can take many different forms, such as a manager who truly hears what an employee has to say, a parent who owns up to their mistakes in raising a child, or a student who takes criticism well. The ancient wisdom of Sirach is echoed in these commonplace situations, which demonstrate how humility develops moral credibility, understanding, and relationships. Another essential virtue highlighted in the text is charity, or deeds of generosity. Sirach frequently links the development of spiritual integrity to how one treats others, particularly the weak, the impoverished, and the disenfranchised. Giving, whether in the form of money, emotional support, or time and care, is portrayed as a concrete manifestation of virtue that uplifts society and brings a person into line with divine values. There are contemporary parallels everywhere. Helping a friend in need, mentoring a young person, or volunteering at a nearby shelter all exemplify the charitable spirit that Sirach advocates. The text emphasizes that moral behavior should transcend self-interest, and these deeds are not done for attention, but rather as organic manifestations of a good heart. The concept of wisdom itself is presented as a living companion, as well as a guiding principle. According to Sirach, wisdom is sensitive to human weakness and provides guidance and insight while gently correcting errors. Thoughtful consideration, relationship discernment, and prudent handling of one's own and society's obligations are all encouraged by wisdom. In the modern sense, wisdom is demonstrated by making choices that strike a balance between immediate gratification and long-term effects, by prioritizing honesty over expediency, and by handling conflict with compassion rather than force. It is an all-encompassing virtue that influences behavior, shapes character, and offers a framework for moral contemplation. Additionally, honesty is portrayed as the cornerstone of virtue. Sirach highlights how dishonesty, deceit, and exaggeration undermine social trust as well as individual integrity. Contrarily, honesty promotes clarity, fortifies bonds, and harmonizes human behavior with divine law. Honesty is still important in today's world. Examples of this include a co-worker accurately reporting project progress, a friend being honest about feelings, or a public figure owning up to mistakes. Sirach emphasizes that being honest is more than just following the facts. It is a reflection of one's character that shapes one's reputation, trust, and ethical coherence in every encounter. In contrast to these virtues, vices like pride, envy, sloth, and dishonesty highlight the traps that impede moral development and taint interpersonal relationships. In all its manifestations, pride breeds arrogance, inflates self-importance, and makes people blind to criticism. According to Sirach, pride is a subtly destructive force that threatens social harmony and ethical consciousness. In the modern world, pride can manifest as a refusal to acknowledge mistakes made at work, a disregard for the contributions of others, or an overestimation of one's own abilities in ways that are detrimental to community or collaboration. The text illustrates how unbridled pride isolates a person and prevents the development of other virtues, such as wisdom and humility. In a similar vein, envy is portrayed as a destructive emotion that undermines happiness and stokes animosity. Sirach cautions that lusting after someone else's achievement, fortune, or status damages relationships and erodes moral character. There are many contemporary examples of the ageless effects of envy, such as jealousy over a peer's promotion, resentment toward a sibling's accomplishments, or resentment over social recognition. The text emphasizes the value of developing perspective, gratitude, and self-awareness by showing how these emotions, if unchecked, impair judgment, cause division, and impede personal development. Another vice that Sirach addresses is laziness, or the failure to take responsibility. Indolence is portrayed in the text as a hindrance to moral growth and spiritual alignment. Missed opportunities, unfulfilled commitments, and a decline in trust in interpersonal and communal relationships are all consequences of laziness. This can manifest in modern life as putting off work, avoiding learning or personal development, or ignoring social and familial responsibilities. According to Sirach, developing virtue and upholding moral integrity require active participation, diligence, and conscientious effort. On the other hand, the responsible and disciplined person experiences both social respect and personal fulfillment, demonstrating the clear link between hard work and moral behavior. Last but not least, deception is emphasized as a vice that damages both the individual and society. Lying, manipulation, and misrepresentation are portrayed in Sirach as harmful, not only because they deceive others, but also because they damage the deceiver's reputation. The repercussions spread, undermining social cohesiveness, relationships, and trust. Nowadays, lying in the workplace, using dishonest marketing techniques, or misrepresenting oneself in interpersonal relationships are all examples of deceit. The idea that virtue and vice are intertwined with both moral and practical outcomes is reinforced by Sirach's teachings, which emphasize the importance of honesty for one's own credibility and the stability of the community. Sirach's comparison of virtues and vices serves as a roadmap for developing moral discernment and comprehending the ramifications of decisions, not just a list of actions. The text helps readers understand the importance of leading an ethical life by putting these attributes into human terms through symbolic characters, real-world examples, and insightful reflections. The situations portrayed in Sirach are reflected in modern life with its stresses, temptations, and social complexities, demonstrating that fostering virtue and avoiding vice are just as important now as they were centuries ago. In order to see how humility, charity, wisdom, and honesty can change relationships, choices, and personal fulfillment, readers are encouraged to internalize these lessons while being on the lookout for the subtle lures of pride, envy, sloth, and dishonesty. Sirach provides timeless moral guidance by relating these ancient teachings to modern situations. In contrast to vice, which is portrayed as disruptive, alienating, and destructive, virtue is portrayed as active and relational, requiring introspection, decision-making, and consistency. Because characters are humanized, readers are able to identify with these hardships, which promotes empathy, self-awareness, and deliberate development. The teachings of Sirach offer a framework for living morally, developing wisdom, and resolving conflicts between desire, responsibility, and spiritual alignment. Whether negotiating interpersonal relationships, professional commitments, or internal moral quandaries. According to Sirach's reflections, life is a short journey with decisions that shape one's destiny and character every day. Mortality is heavily emphasized in the text, but not as a cause for hopelessness, but rather as a reminder of how short human life is and how important it is to live morally. According to Sirach, material wealth, social standing, and power are transient and cannot last a lifetime. This knowledge informs the book's ethical framework, which exhorts readers to develop virtue, practice humility, and behave honorably because they are aware that the effects of their choices go beyond the present. Life is presented as a chance, a platform for character development and testing, and a place where moral decisions have long-term consequences. Sirach asserts that moral responsibility is a part of the human soul. The development of virtue and the alignment of deeds with divine wisdom are essential to its well-being. Living ethically involves more than just following the law or following customs. It involves actively pursuing justice, compassion, and introspection. Sirach makes it clear time and again that doing the right thing enriches the community and the soul in the long run. In God's view, those who act justly, show compassion for the weak, and practice patience and humility are sowing seeds that will eventually bear fruit. The soul's journey is depicted as being entwined with day-to-day behavior, where character and destiny are shaped by both big and small decisions. Sirach explores the human experience of death as well, offering a complex balancing act between morality and realism. The fact that death is unavoidable frames the urgency of leading a moral life. It is presented as a natural transition that emphasizes the significance of leading an ethical life rather than as an abrupt end or a cause for fear. By illustrating how pride, greed, and dishonesty can result in short-term gains, but ultimately leave the soul unprepared for its encounter with God, the text serves as a warning against foolishness and vice. On the other hand, people who develop wisdom, behave honorably, and help others are portrayed as leaving a legacy that transcends physical life, proving that moral decisions have lasting value. There are social and spiritual rewards for doing the right thing. According to Sirach, moral behavior unites people with divine order and fosters mutual respect, trust, and harmony in the community. God, who keeps an eye on both intentions and deeds, promises to recognize the righteous in addition, to their peers. These benefits shape the soul and support the growth of moral character. They are not just transactional. In modern terms, these teachings translate into the knowledge that leading an honest life promotes relationships, personal fulfillment, and a sense of purpose that goes beyond financial success. Reflections on the effects of vice on mortality are also included in the text. People are portrayed as compromising their social status and spiritual well-being when they behave selfishly, hurt other people, or disregard their spiritual obligations. Laziness, dishonesty, and envy are actions that damage trust, cause social disintegration, and undermine the moral foundation of the community. They are not abstract sins. Sirach's cautions are both spiritual and practical, showing that vice has both short-term social repercussions and long-term spiritual ones. The book challenges readers to think about the long-term effects of their choices on others as well as themselves, by placing mortality within the framework of moral behavior. Sirach's reflections on life and death also highlight how transient material success is. Only virtue and wisdom endure in the afterlife. Material wealth, titles, and influence cannot. This viewpoint promotes a change in priorities, calling on people to put their money into relationships, moral development, and deeds of service rather than acquiring material goods or aiming for fleeting fame. The text presents mortality as a catalyst for moral introspection and personal growth, expressing a sense of urgency without resorting to hopelessness. In this sense, the lessons speak to current issues regarding legacy, purpose, and the meaning of life beyond monetary gain. Sirach's thoughts also touch on the moral obligations of people in positions of power. Parents, educators, and leaders are reminded that the moral development of the people under their supervision is shaped by their leadership and example. The development of virtue is presented as a shared duty, with many people impacted by the deeds of one person. Sirach highlights that ethical living is both personal and relational by demonstrating how human behavior is interconnected, which supports the notion that legacy and mortality are entwined with the well-being of others. These teachings encourage readers to think about how their lives fit into the larger fabric of society and community by highlighting the long-lasting effects of moral choices. In spite of death, the text also examines hope and the possibility of spiritual development. Even though death is unavoidable, Sirach stresses that moral behavior, discernment, and devotion lay the groundwork for long-lasting contentment. The soul is portrayed as having the capacity for elevation and refinement, and as being receptive to deliberate thought and action. According to this perspective, dying is a reminder to live intentionally, to pursue virtue, and to give priority to deeds that have lasting moral and spiritual meaning rather than a cause for hopelessness. The emphasis on the growth of the soul and its conformity to divine law highlights how timeless Sirach's teachings are for people looking for direction and significance. Sirach encourages readers to think about the moral implications of everyday choices, the repercussions of actions, and the development of character by relating these ancient reflections to modern life. The principles stated in the text are applicable in both personal and professional contexts, as well as in spiritual practice. Pride, deceit, and selfishness undermine the well-being of individuals and the community, while humility, honesty, charity, and wisdom guide moral action. Mortality frames life as a chance to align with timeless values and leave a positive legacy, serving as a reminder of the value of introspection and intentionality. Sirach connects the dots between traditional wisdom and modern contemplation by incorporating teachings on life, death, and the afterlife into useful advice. The book challenges readers to view death as a spur for moral behavior rather than a constraint, to acknowledge that decisions made in day-to-day life are inextricably linked to the soul's growth, and to realize that moral integrity, not material success, is the source of long-term fulfillment. The lessons are timeless, providing guidance on how to balance ambition, responsibility, and spiritual awareness, and how to live virtuous, introspective lives that have lasting impact in the here and now. In his remarkably clear discussion of the duties of leaders and society at large, Sirach emphasizes the moral and ethical principles required for justice, governance, and the welfare of communities. A leader's character has a significant impact on those under their supervision, and they serve as both mentors and role models. While a ruler who pursues personal ambition or favoritism sows discord and undermines social cohesion, a ruler who practices justice, humility, and compassion cultivates stability and trust. The essay highlights that being a leader is a moral calling that necessitates understanding how one's choices affect other people's lives, rather than just being a position of power. The culture, morals, and cohesiveness of the society are shaped by the decisions made by the ruler. In particular, judges are portrayed as defenders of justice and morality. Sirach emphasizes the importance of accountability, impartiality, and attention to detail. A judge who permits prejudice or corruption to sway judgments runs the risk of causing injustice to the parties concerned, as well as the moral decline of the community. A judge who listens with empathy and carefully considers both evidence and intention builds public trust. A judge who prioritizes wealth or power over principle undermines confidence and sows resentment, according to the text's striking examples. Social harmony and divine alignment are anchored by Sirach's demonstration that justice is both a moral obligation and a practical necessity by tying ethical standards to observable results. Teachers and mentors are also held to a high standard because they are responsible for passing on knowledge, wisdom, and moral guidance to the next generation. Sirach highlights that teaching is about developing character as much as imparting knowledge. A teacher who demonstrates virtue, patience, and insight helps others grow and prepares them to deal with moral and social dilemmas. According to the text, teaching is a relational process in which moral behavior is consistently upheld and guidance is earned via example. There are clear parallels to the present day. Educators who foster critical thinking while exhibiting integrity, who strike a balance between authority and empathy, realize the vision that Sirach outlines. Sirach discusses the moral obligations of society at large in addition to official leadership roles. In light of the interdependence of all people within the social fabric, community members are urged to act with justice, compassion, and accountability. Generosity, honesty, and support are not only personal qualities, but also contribute to the moral well-being of the group. On the other hand, dishonesty, exploitation, and apathy weaken bonds and cause social unrest. Sirach presents society as a living ecosystem in which moral behavior influences both the potential for prosperity and the quality of life by demonstrating both the advantages and disadvantages of human behavior. The difficulties leaders encounter in juggling conflicting demands are also discussed in the text. Along with the potential for influence and advancement, authority also carries the risk of corruption, partiality, and conceit. In order to navigate these pressures, Sirach emphasizes the importance of ethical awareness, humility, and introspection. He also acknowledges the human struggle to exercise power with integrity. Successful leaders demonstrate discernment, care for both short-term and long-term effects, and remain accountable to their followers and moral standards rather than by imposing their will. Storytelling elements vividly illustrate this. a ruler who consults advisors and citizens before making decisions, a wise judge who balances the claims of the wealthy with the cries of the poor, or a teacher who patiently guides students despite personal exhaustion, all demonstrate the practical application of Sirach's guidance. Specifically, justice is presented as a fundamental component of both leadership and the well-being of society. Every decision, no matter how big or small, should be made with fairness in mind, according to Sirach, and any departure from justice hurts not just the individual, but the entire community. The moral ramifications of disregarding justice are regularly emphasized in the text, which presents leaders who act unfairly as planting the seeds of unrest, animosity, and ultimately demise. On the other hand, people who behave honorably foster loyalty, respect, and social cohesiveness, fostering an atmosphere where people can thrive. These lessons are still incredibly applicable today, as moral leadership continues to have an impact on social, political, and educational outcomes all over the world. Ordinary citizens are also encouraged to uphold virtue in their interactions, support justice, and contribute to the well-being of the community, demonstrating that ethical responsibility extends beyond formal roles. By presenting these acts as both moral duties and pragmatic requirements, Sirach demonstrates how a society's ethical makeup is the culmination of its members' individual decisions. Examples from storytelling serve to emphasize this point. A neighbor stepping in to stop exploitation, a community banding together to support the weak, or a person putting integrity and equity first in business transactions are all examples of the moral vision Sirach presents. The text makes ancient wisdom relevant to contemporary experiences by bridging the gap between moral ideals and everyday life, by illustrating ethical behavior in relatable terms. It is suggested that discernment and humility are necessary traits for anyone with power. Character is inextricably linked to authority, as evidenced by the contrast between leaders motivated by pride, ambition, or envy, and those who are aware of their own limitations, seek advice, and exercise restraint. Readers are reminded by Sirach's teachings that power, whether formal or informal, has moral significance and that social harmony depends on its ethical use. These ideas hold true for both large-scale governance and small-scale leadership, such as when an elder in the family mentors younger family members. Lastly, the text highlights accountability, implying that God, in addition to humans, observes social responsibility and leadership. Making moral decisions, upholding the rule of law, and developing virtue are all morally correct and spiritually important. Both citizens and leaders are urged to act in accordance with divine wisdom, understanding that the effects of vice or neglect go beyond short-term material repercussions. By combining moral, social, and spiritual aspects in these teachings, Sirach shows how social responsibility and moral leadership are linked to individual honesty, communal stability, and conformity to divine order. Sirach offers a framework for moral behavior that endures because he humanizes these teachings with examples from leaders, judges, educators, and regular people. The book shows that the values of justice, humility, and integrity are useful instruments for directing people's actions, forming communities, and affecting coming generations rather than being idealistic concepts. The timeless wisdom that Sirach imparts can be embodied by leaders and communities alike through thoughtful contemplation, vigilant action, and moral awareness, creating an atmosphere that fosters virtue and society's well-being. According to Sirach's reflections, spirituality and faith serve as the cornerstones of moral behavior, influencing both individual morality and social harmony. A major theme in the book, the fear of God, is not portrayed as simple dread or terror, but rather as a deep respect, and an awareness of God's presence in all aspects of life. People are guided toward moral behavior, deliberate decision-making, and compassionate action by this fear, which includes awe, respect, and humility. Sirach creates a framework in which spirituality is inextricably linked to everyday life and social behavior by interpreting the fear of God as a blend of reverence and ethical consciousness. Rather than being a passive belief, Sirach presents devotion as an active engagement. The attitude of the heart that goes along with rituals, prayer, and offerings gives them significance in addition to their formality. A person aligns their inner character with divine wisdom when they approach God with humility, mindfulness, and sincerity. This alignment promotes patience in the face of hardship, restraint in temptation, and moral reasoning. The text constantly makes the connection between spiritual awareness and useful results. People who develop a respect for God's law inherently act justly, kindly, and prudently toward others. This is equivalent to living honorably, acting according to values that go beyond short-term self-interest, and letting one's inner values guide one's behavior. Wisdom is also derived from a fear of God. According to Sirach, admitting the existence of divine authority enables people to see their own limitations and the necessity of seeking direction. This understanding promotes introspection, thoughtful consideration, and a humility that restrains arrogance. Examples of people whose understanding of God's power guides their decisions are frequently given in the text. These include a businessman engaging in fair trade, a leader seeking advice before making decisions, or a parent raising children with patience and moral clarity. In each instance, the respect for divine supervision guides moral judgments and fosters a virtue-centered way of living. According to Sirach, moral responsibility and hope are entwined with faith. Devotion to God has societal ramifications that strengthen ties of accountability, justice, and trust. It is not just a personal comfort. By demonstrating that spirituality is relational and personal, a person who upholds God via moral behavior fortifies social structures. Through narrative, the text demonstrates this. A teacher who exemplifies integrity and faith encourages students to follow in their footsteps. A ruler who rules with respect and fairness establishes a benchmark for subjects to follow. These illustrations demonstrate how sincere spiritual practice has a cascading effect on interpersonal relationships, as well as larger societal dynamics. The repercussions of ignoring spiritual devotion are also examined by Sirach. The text cautions that a lack of respect for God causes social discord, unbridled vice, and moral blindness. Ignorance of divine authority is frequently the root cause of pride, dishonesty, and disrespect for moral duties. Sirach demonstrates that faith is a useful manual for leading a responsible life, rather than an ideal, by connecting spiritual neglect to real social and individual repercussions. When ambition, self-interest, or apathy take the place of a thoughtful conscience, contemporary parallels arise. The exploitation of others, disdain for moral principles, or a failure to act compassionately are all examples of the vices the text warns against. Biblical allusions are also organically incorporated into the text to highlight the importance of spirituality. Both moral instruction and narrative reinforcement are provided by verses that highlight the importance of wisdom, the direction of divine law, or the benefits of righteousness. Sirach makes spiritual principles relatable and actionable rather than abstract or theoretical by placing these allusions within the context of human experience. When the command to fear the Lord and turn away from evil is demonstrated through decisions, hardships, and outcomes in day-to-day life, for example, it takes on significance and enables readers to witness how Scripture is applied in real life. God's Awe and respect are offered as useful motivators. Sirach demonstrates how people who internalize this respect behave sensibly, stay out of pointless arguments, and try to make amends when wrongs are done. Judgment is informed by spiritual awareness, which directs people to behave justly and compassionately. It also offers a framework for comprehending pain, loss, and uncertainty, fostering resilience in the face of hardship. By showing that faith is not a passive submission, but rather a dynamic force influencing character and decisions, those who develop a fear of God are shown to have inner stability and moral clarity, even in the midst of chaos. Stories about daily life serve to reinforce the integration of ethical reflection and fear of God. The book illustrates how people who act with spiritual awareness are better able to handle human problems like property disputes, miscommunications, and greedy temptations. An internal compass that promotes tolerance, integrity, and equity is provided by reverence for God. These lessons are applicable to contemporary viewers' social interactions, professional obligations, and family lives, where thoughtful consideration of moral standards can inform choices and promote mutual respect and trust. Alongside spiritual devotion, Sirach also discusses the development of personal virtues. The fear of God strengthens humility, patience, and charity, resulting in a positive feedback loop where devotion is strengthened by action and spirituality informs action. The text demonstrates the reciprocal relationship between spiritual consciousness and ethical living. Virtue practice increases respect for the divine, while devotion cultivates moral clarity. In this sense, Sirach portrays faith as an active interaction with both divine and human realities that shape society, behavior, and character, rather than as a static belief. Sirach illustrates how spirituality is inextricably linked to everyday life by incorporating faith and a fear of God into realistic, relatable narratives. Through the prism of reverence and devotion, moral decisions, introspection, and collective responsibility are all clarified. The book exhorts readers to cultivate virtues that honor the divine and the human community, to allow moral reflection, to direct behavior, and to recognize God's presence in everyday decisions. By highlighting the continuity of moral and spiritual life, this method shows that Sirach's teachings are still applicable to audiences today who are juggling the difficulties of morality, accountability, and social interaction. In addition to its wisdom, the Book of Sirach is notable for its literary skill, which skillfully combines poetry, prose, and aphoristic maxims into a compelling story. The purposeful style aims to convey moral, spiritual, and ethical lessons in a way that is easy to remember and absorb. The writings of Sirach alternate between poetic reflection and direct instruction, fusing lyrical expressions of devotion, human experience, and divine order with helpful advice. This combination enables readers to approach the text from a variety of perspectives. The poetic passages encourage introspection and emotional engagement, while the straightforward teachings provide practical advice, resulting in a multi-layered understanding of the moral universe it depicts. Sirach frequently uses symbolic representation and vivid imagery to make abstract ideas relatable to the human condition. For example, wisdom is personified and frequently portrayed as a counselor, friend or counselor to the human spirit. By allowing readers to picture wisdom as a living entity, this personification serves to emphasize that virtue is not merely an abstract concept, but rather an interactive one that shapes choices, influences behavior, and offers guidance in morally ambiguous situations. Similarly, vice is given nuanced narrative dimensions through human behaviors that highlight the negative effects of arrogance, jealousy, or dishonesty. Sirach humanizes abstract moral concepts by transforming ethical principles into lived experiences, allowing readers to absorb lessons through narrative rather than merely receiving instruction. The maxims used in the text are especially good at making it memorable. Brief, snappy statements that are frequently organized using parallelism or contrast offer direction in succinct, powerful sentences. These maxims, like cautions about patience, humility, or honesty, are designed to stick in your head, making it simple to remember and use in your day-to-day activities. Their cadence, contrast, and repetition reinforce meaning, and their rhythm and balance frequently evoke Hebrew poetic traditions. This stylistic decision guarantees that the lessons are retained and not just read, enabling them to impact behavior and thought long after the initial interaction with the text. Prose passages provide context, elaboration, and narrative depth, which enhance the maxims. Sirach regularly switches to more in-depth explanations of social interaction, moral quandaries, and human behavior, explaining the logic behind each maxim and highlighting its application. The reader is given both quick reference points and thought-provoking tales that enhance comprehension as a result of the interaction between succinct wisdom and narrative elaboration. By using these literary devices, Sirach engages both the intellect and the emotions while transforming ethical teaching into a lived, experiential encounter. Symbolism is essential for improving comprehension and producing visual resonance. Abstract ideas are grounded in tangible, recognizable contexts through the imagery of scrolls, temples, Jerusalem streets, and everyday life. Narrative scaffolding for moral lessons is provided by scenes of courts, marketplaces, and schools, which illustrate how virtues and vices appear in real-world circumstances. Sirach makes moral lessons concrete by placing them in familiar contexts, which enables readers to observe how wisdom is applied directly in social, familial, and private domains. As a result, visual storytelling serves as a conduit between the written word and the imagination of the reader, enhancing the depth and durability of lessons. Additionally, the literary style uses parallelism and rhythm as cognitive aids to help readers remember and retain moral values. In order to strengthen meaning, many passages repeat concepts with minor modifications, mirroring Hebrew poetic conventions. Admonitions to act justly or refrain from arrogance, for instance, frequently occur in couplets or triplets, which improves the sense of balance and order while also making memorization easier. This stylistic element demonstrates how form and content are intertwined and how a lesson's impact, comprehension, and retention can be greatly influenced by its presentation. It also reflects an understanding of human cognition. In order to increase relatability, Sirach also employs storytelling cues. Characters from everyday life, such as parents, students, rulers, and merchants, act as role models or warnings, demonstrating to readers how virtues and vices appear in real-world scenarios. These characters are given depth by dialogue, introspection, and narrative tension, which depict challenges, uncertainties, and victories. A story about a father teaching his kids to be honest in the face of temptation, for example, has both emotional resonance and a useful example of a maxim. By placing themselves in comparable circumstances, readers are able to relate ethical teaching to personal experience. This integration of instruction, reflection, and narrative improves text engagement and guarantees that lessons are retained. Oral transmission is also supported by Sirach's narrative and visual elements. The rhythm, repetition, and imagery made the lessons easier to understand and more memorable in a time when texts were frequently read aloud or committed to memory. Mnemonic devices included stories that illustrated abstract principles, phrases repeated for emphasis, and scrolls with decorative motifs. By simultaneously hearing the text and seeing scenarios, audiences were able to reinforce moral values through both visual and oral means. This interaction of narrative, sound, and imagery enhances comprehension and guarantees that the lessons are passed down through the generations. Clarity and reinforcement are even provided by the book's structure, which is divided into thematic sections and punctuated by narrative examples. Sirach makes it possible for readers to tackle difficult ethical issues in digestible chunks by organizing lessons on social responsibility, justice, humility, and family relationships. A cumulative understanding of moral and spiritual principles is produced by each section supporting the one before it. Whether through character development or poetic analysis, storytelling unifies the sections and keeps them from coming across as separate warnings. Instead, it presents a coherent ethical worldview. Biblical allusions incorporated into the writing style preserve narrative interest while boosting authority and authenticity. Sirach's teachings are placed within a larger spiritual and cultural framework through the use of scriptural allusions, whether they are to earlier Hebrew texts or more recent Hellenistic influences. The audience is able to experience scripture as living guidance rather than abstract doctrine, because these allusions are interwoven into stories, dialogues, and poetic reflections. Sirach makes sure that moral and spiritual lessons are believable and approachable by fusing well-known allusions with intricate storytelling. All things considered, Sirach's literary style, its poetic rhythm, maxims, narrative storytelling, and symbolic imagery, is an effective teaching and contemplative tool. By combining prose, poetry, and real-world examples, a multifaceted experience is produced that appeals to both the intellect and the emotions and makes moral lessons memorable. By bridging the gap between the wisdom of ancient Jerusalem and modern life, visual cues, symbolic representations, and likable characters improve understanding. Sirach turns the written word into an immersive experience that inspires, challenges, and guides readers throughout time by fusing narrative, education, and imagery. The differences and distinctive contributions of Sirach are made abundantly evident when we compare it to other wisdom writings, such as Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the writings contained in the Dead Sea Scrolls. For instance, Proverbs are succinct, offering brief, snappy quotes that are intended to provide useful advice in an approachable and memorable manner. Although its lessons on integrity, hard work, and righteousness are universal, they frequently lack narrative complexity and instead concentrate on condensed proverbs. The tone of Ecclesiastes, on the other hand, is more philosophical and reflective, raising issues such as the purpose of life, the certainty of death, and the boundaries of human comprehension. Its themes examine existential conflict, highlighting the transient nature of material goals and the significance of respect for God as life's ultimate fulcrum. But within this range of wisdom literature, Sirach holds a special place. It blends historical background, philosophical contemplation, and narrative illustration with hands-on learning. In contrast to Proverbs' succinct maxims, Sirach frequently goes into greater detail to explain the rationale behind moral advice, offering anecdotes, comparisons, and contemplations that give the values it promotes a human face. Sirach places the universal mysteries of life in social, familial, and civic contexts, demonstrating how respect for God, moral behavior, and wisdom interact in day-to-day existence, whereas Ecclesiastes ponders these mysteries. Sirach develops a multifaceted framework that tackles both individual morality and societal responsibility by combining these components. Another analogy is provided by the Dead Sea Scrolls. These texts, which were found in the middle of the 20th century, include sectarian and apocryphal writings that capture the political, social, and religious climate of Second Temple Judaism. Some scrolls show concern for purity, social order, and covenantal obedience by including moral exhortations, legal directives, and liturgical guidance. Sirach addresses these issues, but he does so in a way that is more approachable and uses a more expansive narrative style. By fusing piety, ethics, and practical wisdom in a way that appeals to both individual readers and communities, its teachings are intended to resonate with a wider audience rather than being restricted to a specific sect or limited legalistic framework. The way that Sirach integrates the social, spiritual, and personal facets of life is one of its distinctive contributions. Through stories and real-world examples, it examines virtues like humility, charity, and patience, as well as vices like pride, envy, and dishonesty, enabling readers to see the effects of their decisions. The text also discusses the duties of citizens, judges, leaders, and educators, establishing a connection between moral behavior and both divine accountability and societal stability. This all-encompassing method sets Sirach apart from other wisdom writings, offering direction for both individual behavior and the moral operation of entire societies. The historical and cultural uniqueness of Sirach is another characteristic that sets it apart. The text, which was composed in Jerusalem at the beginning of the 2nd century BCE, captures the Hellenistic influences that were prevalent in Jewish culture at the time. Without sacrificing its Jewish heritage, the text's approach to ethics, introspection, and teaching is gently influenced by Greek philosophical concepts, social structures, and discourse patterns. Although fundamental, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes lack the same degree of historical context, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, although full of sectarian viewpoints, frequently speak to more limited social issues. Sirach's timeless relevance is a result of its capacity to reconcile cultural influences with adherence to Jewish moral and religious precepts. There are historical and theological aspects to the question of why Sirach was left out of Protestant Bible versions, but included in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles. Early church leaders in both the Catholic and Orthodox traditions acknowledged the importance of Sirach for moral teaching, spiritual development, and historical understanding when the Christian biblical canon was being formed. Its canonical status in these traditions was further cemented by its inclusion in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of Hebrew texts that was extensively used in the early church. However, the Hebrew Masoretic text, which excluded Sirach, was cited by Protestant reformers as the primary source for the Old Testament. Although it was widely used in early Christian teaching and devotion, its exclusion from Protestant Bibles can be explained by this difference in textual tradition. When it comes to practical application, Sirach stands out from other texts due to its deep ethical depth and rich narrative. Sirach uses teaching, introspection, and practical examples to guide behavior, while Proverbs offers advice in the form of succinct aphorisms, and Ecclesiastes reflects on life's uncertainties. This method ensures that the text's lessons are not abstract, but rather vividly illustrated through human experience, making it especially engaging for teaching and memorization. Its ability to address spiritual, societal, and personal issues all at once shows a remarkable adaptability and relevance that has kept its readership alive for centuries. Furthermore, Sirach acknowledges human frailty while offering practical methods for virtue, addressing ethical issues with empathy and nuance. It exhorts readers to make wise decisions, to see the negative effects of vice, and to strive for a life that is in accordance with divine wisdom. The text encourages both intellectual engagement and emotional resonance by enshrining these lessons in narrative, poetic, and reflective forms. While Ecclesiastes examines life's ambiguities from A philosophical distance, Proverbs provides comparable moral guidance but depends more on repetition and conciseness. Sirach creates a thorough manual for negotiating the social and personal facets of life by fusing narrative richness, depth, and clarity. Last but not least, Sirach's timeless appeal comes from its integration of custom, knowledge, and useful teaching. Its lessons are applicable to many cultures and generations, serving as a link between the ethical ideas of ancient Judaism and current issues with morality, social responsibility, leadership, and individual behavior. Readers can understand Sirach's unique contribution, a text that is simultaneously educational, introspective, narratively driven, and morally rigorous, by contrasting it with Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. While its exclusion from Protestant canon emphasizes the difficulties of textual tradition and canon formation, its inclusion in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles shows that this value is acknowledged. In each instance, Sirach continues to be a wealth of human wisdom, providing direction that cuts across boundaries of time, culture, and religion. Despite having been written more than 2,000 years ago, the wisdom found in the Book of Sirach has a strong resonance with the decisions and difficulties of contemporary life. Beyond ancient Jerusalem and Hellenistic Jewish society, its teachings provide useful advice for moral behavior, interpersonal relationships, and decision-making in the complicated world of today. Sirach's ability to blend timeless moral precepts with common human experience is among its most remarkable features. It demonstrates to readers how virtues like discernment, patience, humility, and honesty can be actively used in modern situations. Think about the difficulty of making decisions, which is a part of everyone's life. Sirach stresses the value of careful consideration, consequences awareness, and moral alignment. These lessons could be applied to ethical business decisions in a modern workplace, such as avoiding the temptation to take shortcuts, treating co-workers fairly, and maintaining transaction transparency. Today's professionals encounter circumstances that put their integrity to the test, such as contract negotiations, team dynamics management, or handling sensitive data, just as Sirach cautions against greed and dishonesty. People embody the very virtues that Sirach promotes when they approach these decisions mindfully and with the values of justice and honesty in mind. Sirach's advice is also beneficial for relationships, whether they are romantic, familial, or social. The importance of patience, empathy, and respect for one another as necessary elements of peaceful communication is emphasized throughout the text. Consider a parent negotiating the difficulties of parenting in the digital age, which is full of peer pressure, distractions, and moral ambiguity. Sirach promotes teaching by example, fostering virtues in kids via consistent moral behavior as well as instruction. In a similar vein, friends or co-workers who are modest and kind, who don't harbor jealousy or animosity, promote cooperation and trust. Sirach's teachings on human behavior are thus translated into useful methods for preserving relationships that are morally sound, meaningful, and productive. Additionally, ethical quandaries are handled delicately and lucidly. Sirach acknowledges that human decisions are frequently difficult, full of conflicting interests, and impacted by both internal and external factors. For instance, contemporary professionals may have to decide whether to disclose unethical activity, how to fairly distribute limited resources, or how to strike a balance between individual aspirations and the welfare of the group. Sirach provides a framework for dealing with these difficulties. Put integrity first, behave modestly, and think about both the short and long-term effects. A thoughtful approach to ethical problem-solving is promoted by its emphasis on discernment, knowing not only the proper course of action, but also the reasons and consequences behind decisions. Social responsibility and financial behavior are two more areas in which Sirach offers useful lessons. The book frequently cautions against selfishness, exploitation, and greed in favor of kindness, justice, and consideration for the weak. In today's world, this could entail charitable giving, treating workers fairly, investing ethically, or volunteering for community projects. A person who lives by these values understands that opportunities, wealth, and power come with responsibilities, and that moral decisions can benefit families, communities, and society as a whole. These lessons provide a guide for incorporating ethical awareness into day-to-day activities, turning idealistic concepts into actualized behavior. Sirach also offers guidance on self-discipline and personal development. In a society that is frequently dominated by material ambition, social comparison, and instant gratification, its warnings against pride, impulsivity, and laziness are poignant. For example, someone who wants to progress in their studies or profession can use Sirach's advice to develop endurance, diligence, and patience. One can overcome obstacles with resilience and grow from failures instead of giving in to frustration or resentment by abstaining from arrogance and practicing humility. These teachings show that moral contemplation and deliberate work are essential components of personal growth. The significance of striking a balance between individual aspirations and societal responsibilities is also emphasized in the text. People are frequently under pressure from modern society to put achievement, status, and success above moral behavior or interpersonal relationships. Sirach reminds readers that real wisdom entails balancing one's obligations to others with one's own aspirations. For instance, a manager may be tempted to put profit ahead of justice, but by upholding the values of integrity and justice, they create long-term success and promote a positive, collaborative atmosphere. Similar to this, people who are making decisions for their families or themselves gain from considering both their own interests and the welfare of others, which reflects the text's all-encompassing approach to moral behavior. Another contemporary application of Sirach's teachings is emotional intelligence. In social interactions, the text promotes empathy, understanding, and patience, which develops moral sensitivity and emotional awareness. These traits are extremely valuable in modern situations, such as social activism, family disputes, and workplace dynamics. The qualities Sirach praises are best exemplified by someone who listens intently, reacts compassionately, and controls their emotions during stressful situations. People can act morally and emotionally intelligently, connecting traditional wisdom with contemporary human experience by developing self-awareness and relational sensitivity. In addition, Sirach discusses the unavoidability of difficulties, failures, and death while providing useful resilience techniques. The text equips readers to handle disappointment, loss, or moral ambiguity with poise by fusing faith, ethical reflection, and social responsibility with an awareness of life's limitations. In the face of personal or professional adversity, modern readers can understand this as developing mental toughness, moral consistency, and spiritual rootedness. Moral courage, patience, and foresight lessons serve as a framework for making wise decisions and overcoming hardship. Using Sirach's wisdom in contemporary life still heavily relies on storytelling. Through the use of real-world examples, ethical quandaries, and sympathetic characters, the text demonstrates concepts in action and enables readers to imagine themselves in comparable situations. A parent raising children, a professional faced with moral dilemmas, or a citizen exercising civic duty can all identify with these tales, absorb the lessons, and apply them to real-world actions. The stories make wisdom approachable, practical, and emotionally compelling by transforming impersonal principles into real-life experiences. In the end, Sirach's useful teachings emphasize that leading an ethical life is a continuous, deliberate process. Moral introspection, humility, and respect for divine direction inform relationships, decision-making, social responsibility, and personal development. The book shows that while vices are restrained by awareness, self-control, and moral responsibility, virtues are developed via experience, introspection, and constant action. Sirach provides a timeless manual for negotiating life's complexities with honesty, empathy, and discernment by fusing traditional wisdom with modern realities. Anyone who is willing to listen is profoundly impacted by the Book of Sirach's rich stories and useful lessons. It weaves together moral teachings, highlighting the virtues of humility, patience, charity, and honesty, while cautioning against arrogance, jealousy, sloth, and dishonesty. It serves as a reminder that life is a finely balanced series of decisions, each of which has an impact on our communities as well as ourselves. By teaching that reverence for God, the fear of God, is not a remote abstract idea, but rather a guiding principle that influences our choices, relationships, and perception of mortality. The text highlights the inseparability of ethical living from spiritual awareness. Sirach bridges the gap between ancient wisdom and modern life by speaking to the universal human experience. Sirach's advice promotes thoughtful, moral, and compassionate choices by encouraging introspection before acting in a time when decisions are frequently influenced by convenience, peer pressure, or ephemeral ambition. Its relationship-related insights serve as a helpful reminder to cultivate trust and cooperation with family, friends, and co-workers by practicing empathy, patience, and humility. Sirach also sheds light on leadership, civic duty, and social ethics by teaching that leaders, judges, and citizens must all act justly and strategically because moral integrity promotes stability and enduring respect. In Sirach, mortality and the afterlife, subjects that are frequently shunned in casual discourse, are discussed openly and subtly. The book invites readers to consider life's transient nature, the legacy we leave behind, and the significance of leading a morally upright and meaningful life. We are reminded that every action adds to a greater fabric of human and divine connection when we think about the ethical and spiritual aspects of our decisions. These lessons are still relevant in today's world, from choices made in one's personal and professional life to larger social and religious obligations. The wisdom in the book serves as a mirror, challenging us to honestly and bravely assess our lives. Sirach continuously connects spiritual grounding and practical morality in its teachings. Honest, patient, and compassionate decisions have spiritual significance in addition to being socially admirable. Therefore, an awareness of God's presence and the guiding principles inherent in creation are inextricably linked to ethical living. According to Sirach, the fear of God is a source of knowledge, a guide for overcoming obstacles in life, and an inspiration for moral introspection. In modern terms, this could mean being mindful, diligent, and accountable in all areas of life, balancing individual integrity with the welfare of society. Its impact is further enhanced by Sirach's literary genius. Lessons become memorable, relatable, and emotionally impactful when prose, poetry, narrative, and aphorisms are combined to engage the mind and the heart. Readers can visualize problems, decisions, and outcomes thanks to the text's narrative, and its contemplative maxims condense important truths for real-world use. The wisdom of Sirach is not only theoretical, but also lived, experienced, and applicable across generations thanks to this dual approach of illustration and principle. Sirach's distinctiveness is made clear by contrasting it with other wisdom writings, such as Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the writings found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It combines moral instruction with social duty, philosophical contemplation with narrative illustration, and individual virtue with group concern. While its exclusion from the Protestant canon emphasizes historical and textual differences rather than a lack of merit, its inclusion in the Catholic and Orthodox Bibles recognizes this value. Its lessons are timeless and applicable to anyone looking for direction, understanding, or moral clarity, regardless of its canonical status. Sirach provides both motivation and useful guidance for viewers today. It promotes introspection and accountability while serving as a reminder that moral behavior is entwined with spiritual and personal development. The text offers a framework based on virtue, wisdom, and reverence that can be used to navigate difficult interpersonal relationships, career decisions, or societal issues. Its significance endures because human struggles, desires, and decisions have remained remarkably constant over the ages, and Sirach's teachings have continued to light the way toward moral rectitude, empathy, and purposeful living. The Bible states that if studying the Book of Sirach and its teachings on life, death, and moral behavior has been beneficial to you, to help us reach 10,000 subscribers, please remember to share this video with your friends and subscribe to the channel. To help us financially so that more people can see these stories and insights, you can also send us a super thanks. Remember to leave a comment below with your name, city, and the location and time you are viewing this video. For your convenience, a link to the English versions of the complete Bible's 88 books and the Book of Enoch is included in the description. Sirach's timeless wisdom inspires us to take action in both our thoughts and our daily lives. We are motivated to consider our decisions, interpersonal relationships, and societal contributions when we consider virtue and vice, mortality, ethical behavior, and the fear of God. Every tiny action, such as a kind deed, patient reaction, or sincere choice, contributes to a life of moral character and meaning. According to Sirach, wisdom is a daily practice that enhances one's character and helps those around one. It is not a far-off ideal. Allow these lessons to direct your thoughts and behavior as you think about them. Allow moral courage to direct your choices, humility to restrain ambition, and patience to mold your relationships. Allow your fear of God to guide you through the challenges of life, not as fear, but as awe and respect. And allow Sirach's wisdom to motivate you to work towards spiritual awareness, moral behavior, and personal development so that you can leave a legacy of compassion, virtue, and meaning that will last long after you are gone. Combining moral teaching, narrative wisdom, and spiritual direction, the Book of Sirach offers more than just historical information. It is a living manual for negotiating life's decisions and obstacles. Its teachings are just as relevant in modern workplaces, homes, communities, and cities as they were in the streets and synagogues of ancient Jerusalem. We can develop lives characterized by virtue, accountability, and a deep comprehension of our relationship to God, ourselves, and each other by carefully embracing these teachings. What ancient wisdom can guide us through life, death, and everything in between? This question has echoed across centuries, whispered through the halls of history, and etched into the sacred texts that have survived the test of time. Among these texts, one book stands out as a repository of practical, moral, and spiritual guidance, the Book of Sirach, also known as Ecclesiasticus. Written more than 2,000 years ago, it offers insights into human nature, the responsibilities we carry toward one another, and the eternal consequences of our choices. In a world where ethical dilemmas and personal struggles remain constant, the lessons found in Sirach feels surprisingly relevant, reminding us that ancient wisdom still speaks to modern lives. Whether navigating complex relationships, facing the challenges of leadership, or wrestling with questions of mortality, the guidance within this text provides both grounding and reflection. Imagine Jerusalem in the 2nd century BCE, a city alive with cultural intersections and intellectual ferment. The streets were filled with the scent of spices, the echoes of marketplaces, and the hum of philosophical debate. The Jewish people were deeply rooted in their traditions, yet exposed to the Hellenistic influences that spread across the region following the conquests of Alexander the Great. Within this vibrant but turbulent environment lived a scribe named Ben Sira. He observed the intricacies of society, the behavior of rulers, the conduct of families, and the moral challenges that shaped everyday life. With clarity and insight, he compiled his observations into a guidebook of wisdom that could instruct not only his contemporaries, but generations yet to come. His work reflects a deep understanding of the human condition, combining ethical reflection with practical advice, grounded in a profound reverence for God. Sirach's writings cover a remarkable range of topics. He addresses personal virtues, such as humility, patience, and honesty, while warning against vices like pride, laziness, and deceit. He offers guidance for leaders and rulers, emphasizing fairness, justice, and responsibility. Beyond human interactions, he explores the connection between ethical behavior and divine order, highlighting how reverence for God shapes a life of integrity and purpose. The book does not present wisdom as a distant, abstract concept. Rather, it is practical, applied, and deeply rooted in real-world experience. Through maxims, proverbs, and reflections, Sirach communicates lessons that are at once timeless and intimately human. The value of the Book of Sirach lies not only in its practical advice, but also in its universal relevance. Life in the modern age is filled with moral challenges that, though expressed differently, mirror those faced by people in ancient Jerusalem. Decisions about honesty in the workplace, responsibility toward family and community, and confronting personal ambition are issues that persist across millennia. By engaging with the teachings of Sirach, we are invited to pause, reflect, and consider how our actions align with ethical principles and spiritual awareness. It encourages a perspective that balances worldly responsibilities with higher moral standards, offering a blueprint for navigating the complexities of life with clarity and conscience. To understand Sirach is to appreciate the man behind the text. Ben Sira was not a distant philosopher. He was a meticulous observer of life and a participant in the world he described. His writing conveys empathy for the struggles of ordinary people, acknowledging the tensions between desire and discipline, power and humility, life and mortality. He recognized that ethical guidance is meaningful only when it resonates with lived experience, and he wrote with an awareness that wisdom must be applicable, actionable, and comprehensible. Through his work, readers encounter a voice that is both instructive and approachable, one that speaks across the ages with honesty and moral clarity. As we begin this journey through the Book of Sirach, it is important to remember that the text is not merely an ancient artifact, it is a living source of reflection and insight. Its teachings invite readers to examine the choices they make, the virtues they cultivate, and the ethical standards by which they live. By exploring its pages, we connect with a tradition of moral inquiry that extends far beyond the boundaries of its historical moment. Each lesson, each reflection, and each proverb carries the weight of centuries, offering guidance for personal growth, communal harmony, and spiritual understanding. Before we dive further into the stories and wisdom of Sirach, I want to encourage you, the viewer, to take part in this journey actively. Bible says, If you're enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe and share it with your friends. Help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support ensures that more people can discover the timeless lessons hidden within these texts. You can also send a super thanks to support us financially, helping us continue producing content that explores the rich history and wisdom of biblical literature. Take a moment to comment below your name and city, letting us know where and when you're watching this video. Your participation brings this community to life. And finally, if you wish to study further, the complete Bible 88 books and the Book of Enoch in English are available through the link in the description, offering you direct access to the original wisdom texts we are exploring together. With this foundation laid, we are ready to step into the world of Jesus Ben Sirach, to witness the moral landscapes he navigated and to uncover the lessons he sought to impart. From the bustling streets of ancient Jerusalem to the inner chambers of ethical reflection, the Book of Sirach presents a journey of thought, insight, and spiritual awareness. Its teachings are more than guidelines. They are invitations to consider how we live, how we act, and how we honor the sacred principles that govern our shared humanity. As we continue, let us keep in mind that each lesson, proverb, and reflection is designed to speak to the heart, offering guidance that is as relevant today as it was more than 2 millennia ago. Jesus Ben Sirach was a perceptive observer of life, who was aware of the hardships and goals of those around him. He was more than just a scribe or a compiler of wisdom. He was raised in a period of political and cultural unrest after being born in Jerusalem in the 2nd century BCE. Jewish traditions and the Hellenistic values that had taken over the Eastern Mediterranean coexisted incongruously in the city, which was a nexus of tradition and outside influence. Sirach had a deep regard for education and an innate interest in human behavior patterns from a young age. Despite his intense focus on studying the Torah, he was not afraid to observe the social, political, and personal struggles that regular people faced. He realized that wisdom had to deal with the practical realities of living morally in a world that was complicated and changing. It could not be separated from everyday life. The values of piety, education, and social responsibility that Sirach's family and community upheld influenced his upbringing. Since he was young, he has observed elders resolve conflicts within the community, mediate disagreements, and reach decisions that strike a balance between compassion and justice. His views on human ambition, virtue and vice, and the moral duties that all people have to God and one another were shaped by these experiences. He was a man who lived in Jerusalem, watched the marketplace, synagogues and courts, and paid close attention to the stories of people around him rather than a solitary philosopher who lived in a study. His observations were based on human experience, reality, and the social climate of his era. Even Jerusalem was a city of contrasts. The city was surrounded by families, merchants, and students going about their daily lives, but it was also impacted by outside forces. Traditional Jewish customs were in conflict with Greek language